thinking about other things that we want to do, and I mean, I can never exactly explain the process of coming up with an idea because it's never complete. It's, fragments of, a situation or a character or something. So having the opportunity to work with someone that share a certain kind of, philosophy about things, a taste or a kind of similar way of thinking about things, it's great to be able to go, say even the slightest thing I thought about, this story. I guess we're trying to create situations and stories that will allow us to explore various themes. And we don't start from what we want to explore. We start from creating these situations and see, those kind of conflicts. Where do they lead us, and is it somewhere interesting? And does it raise a lot of questions about human beings, about society, about feelings, about whatever that is that seems interesting. So yeah, we just start by saying, how about this young boy who has lost his father, and he considers the doctor responsible, and there's this ambiguous kind of situation where doctors are supposed to be doing the best that they can, to save people's lives, but of course they don't always succeed, and are they to blame, and who's to blame, and could it be done any other different way, and all those kind of things start coming up, and then the dynamic between a very young boy all of a sudden being in control of a grown man's life, and so we just have this conversation about where can this go and what kind of a story you can create around that, and it develops from there, or it can start from something completely different. So yeah, that's the kind of dialogue that I'm referring to.
I guess I'm just curious. I remember seeing Michael Haneke talking about his screenwriting process, and he said in a similar way to you, it starts with different things. And he said, I've got this mental box that I drop things into, and sometimes one thing works, but I can't think of anything else. It goes in the box, and I might come back to it later. But he said, then if I have two things, and they're interesting, and then the third comes along, then I kind of think that's where it starts. And I wonder, in your working process together, have you got to that point where you have things that you think, yeah, that's good, but that's not going to go here, and it's these two or three things, once they start to kick in, you have something, or is it not that methodical?
Well, we'll try to decide relatively quickly whether we have something that we're interested in, and we either leave it or we see that there's something there and we try to develop it. So I think it's methodical in the way that it's relatively fast. But it doesn't there's not stuff that we keep around for a long time, or maybe there's stuff that we've thought of and left on the side and then used them in something different, if it's just a part of an element of something that we can use in some other story or some other film.
So in this process, at what point in time did Euripides, Iphigenia and all this sort of come into the equation? That it's then referenced in the film itself.
Yeah. Well, when we had the initial setup that there was this boy that lost his father, and he considered the doctor responsible and asks of him this huge act on his behalf, we immediately understood that this has similarities with the Euripides' tragedy Iphigenia in Aulis. So we thought that it was interesting to reference it in various ways in the film to make the connection of such an ancient text with something so contemporary.
And with the idea of thinking about that text, which deals with, in many ways, with a very primal form of retribution and justice that one could argue is almost biblical in nature, was that an element that fed into the idea that you would set the film in America, which in many levels has been seen to deal with its idea about religion, perhaps in certain ways, is more extreme than you might have in this country.
Yes, that was part of it. I mean, there was a general instinctive thing about, where does it feel right to set this film. And America, one of the reasons being their relationship to religion and justice and all those kind of things has a particular color to it. Another thing was for me the class thing, that in America, people that have made it in a certain way as professionals, they're not considered of so much an aristocracy or a different class, and it's not so, the division is not so great, and I didn't want that to become like the focus of the film, so I wanted that to be a little faded. Of course, there's a difference in class and all, but it has a different texture to it in America than it would here, for instance, I think. And the other thing was just the culture of, the kind of films that this flirts with, horror films or thriller films or films that I grew up with, and that kind of atmosphere, the supernatural, that is known to me more, as something that I know from that culture. So yeah, for various reasons, I just thought that it would be more fitting to set it in America.
And then against that old world style of retribution and justice, you've got this pristine world. Everything is clean, everything is new. And again, not just so much the fact that you've got a surgeon as one of the roles, but the ideas that you had about creating this world that is so new and clean.
Yeah. Well, actually, that much of it, although it works in many different ways after the fact that you've made the film, it was important for me to, for the hospital, which plays an important part in the story, to feel like a state-of-the-art, pristine hospital that, you would have the feeling that, you're in good hands and people know what they're doing and they're doing their best and they can't figure out what's wrong with the kids. So that was an important part of the story. So the hospital had to appear to give you that kind of impression visually. So that led to choosing a hospital of that nature, and of course that starts to lend a certain look to the film. So you go with it, and then as you observe it also interacts with the story in different ways and adds other things to it, and maybe the juxtaposition with what's going on. And because for instance, another reason that I wanted to make the film there was like I wanted the film to be relatively bright in a way, and it's summer and it's juxtaposing the darkness of the themes in the story. So all these come into play in various ways. But it started from a practical thing that, for the story to work better, that we need that kind of space that, has these characteristics that make you believe certain things.
The first time I saw this film, I was reminded through the use of dialogue. There's a really great low-budget film by Steven Soderbergh called Schizopolis, and it's kind of a series of sketches. And one of the sketches involves this businessman's relationship with his family, and rather than speak dialogue, he kind of speaks directions. So he comes home and says, "Man arrives at home, greeting to wife, not very interesting, suggests having sex," and it's just these bizarre directions that kind of make you aware of how much bullshit we perhaps speak in everyday life and the banalities of everyday conversation. I'm sure you're really interesting, by the way, but the banalities of most everyday conversation. And I'm just wondering, does something inside you, or both of you, when you're writing it, just you kind of rebel against the banalities of everyday conversation that pushes you towards this incredible dialogue?
I think we just find it interesting and funny because I think much of it is taken from real life, or much of it is maybe a little more sincere than it would be, which makes it a little bit awkward. Um, so I think that's how we approach it. I mean, there's not this theory around the banality of everyday life or whatever. It's what we hear and find interesting, and I guess when you take something of everyday life and you put it up there and against a different situation and in contradiction with, like there's a open heart surgery operation and then you have these two people talking about their watches. That, individually they're two different things, but when you juxtapose them, it creates this funny, awkward, whatever it is for each person feel to it, or a certain kind of honesty in and directness that we don't necessarily use in our everyday life creates a strange feeling, and I think that's where this whole thing comes from.
I guess that's the thing. These characters have no buffer that we normally use in life. It's odd that for all the terrible things that happen in this film, one of the scenes that really unsettles me is the conversation about body hair and the request to see body hair. And it's just, I don't know if it's because I'm just way too British for my own good, but it's just this sense of palpable embarrassment that I feel.
Yeah. Well, we Greeks have a lot of hair generally. it's a point of conversation a lot.
I think lack of hair is a conversation I really don't want to get into on stage.
We have that in common.
Yes. I'm a little further down the line. Right, are there any questions at the moment? We've got someone there, and then we'll come down to the front as well, if we have another mic. Yep.
Hello. First, I really want to thank Yorgos for being yourself. I just want to say that I wrote my bachelor dissertation on your films. So thank you so much, and I'm writing my master's dissertation on your films as well.
Thank you, that's very scary. But
coming back to the allusion to Europe's tragedy, I just want to ask this question if you would agree that since it's just mentioned, it's not well told, it's not outspoken, so it's for the viewer to make the connection themselves. Would you agree that what's concealed in film is just as important or even more important than what is outrightly shown?
Yes, definitely. I guess I'm not interested in making films that just give you something like an absolute truth or are didactic in any kind of way, or so I do try and leave gaps open in the films in various ways, not necessarily plot-wise, but things that trigger thoughts around issues and themes and behavior and feelings, and so yes, I definitely think that films should be made in a way that allow the viewers and the audience to engage with them actively and have to make their own mind about certain things and about how they feel about certain things and how do they understand and perceive others, and hopefully keep them in their heads for more than the 2 hours that you spend here. And so yes, I do agree. Yes.
Someone had their hand up. Yeah, we'll go there and over here as well if we can bring the mic down.
Just a question mostly about really about style, and when you create your films, do you kind of think of like the kind of style you're creating? Because across most of your films, it's kind of like almost a style of these pale colours and again awkward encounters. And would you classify, like if I watch your films, I think this is a Yorgos film, like it's almost a style now, and is there any inspiration for that and why you did that, and do you always think when you're making a film, this is what I want to do and kind of follow the style? Well, I do it in different stages, I think.
I'm very focused on each individual stage separately. So when we're writing, I really just concentrate on that and don't worry about how a film is going to look and what's the style of it is going to be. The writing stage, I think it's just, most of the films I've written so far with Tim, it's just the way we know how to approach them. It's not like very conscious. We're trying to create a style or a tone. It's how we know how to tell stories and how to approach things. I think a lot of thought comes on the next stage when you try and see, okay, this thing that we've written, how can it be materialized? How can it be visualized? I always try to do certain things differently with every film, just in order to not, get bored with myself. But at the same time, there are things that you learn and things that you realize that you like and prefer. So you bring that with you every film that you make. And I always try to materialize the film in a way that is dictated by the context of what we've written. So for this film, for instance, visually, when I was thinking how we're going to film this, a lot of it came from me thinking that it would be interesting if the whole film felt like there was a different entity, following these people around. So that kind of led me to filming them from higher angles and lower angles, like there's something hovering above them, and so that came out of what we had written, and I hadn't thought of it in the initial stage before we started writing. And then creating a visual language drives you to make certain choices with sound, for instance, or find the tone of the film in that direction. So I guess it's a process for me. It's not like there's a concept in the beginning of what it should be. It's like every step I discover things and they kind of fall into place, if that makes sense.
Hello. First of all, I wanted to say that what I like about your movies personally is that it always leads to a discussion afterwards. It's usually a big debate. And with this one, it's a very straightforward one. But was there a particular idea with the fact of killing the youngest child at the end? Is it like a symbology that there's no justice, or I don't know, anything? It just, to me, it was the strangest choice. I kind of expected for the mother to, take some sort of sacrifice, which would have seemed more, maybe easier and natural, and it was very bold for me that it was the youngest one that was sacrificed at the end.
Yeah, well, it depends. I don't know. I don't think that any of it would feel good anyway. I imagine. It just led to that. No, and the youngest child, the slightly older child, would that be better? I don't know. So to be honest, I don't know exactly how we ended up with the younger child. I think it was because he was kind of already dying, and it felt like a slightly better way to end it. But I just think that it's a kind of a dead end where the whole film leads to, and yes, it is meant to kind of show that kind of desperation and inability to make those kind of decisions and see anything just around this whole thing.
Read between the lines on that. If you're ever in hospital and Yorgos is visiting, hide. Do we have another question? Yes, we've got someone here and someone down the front as well. She goes 3 rows back and then come to the front.
Hey, I was just wondering, what is the kind of process behind kind of creating one of your characters?
The characters. It's it's mostly. I don't think we individually think about them too much. It's more how they function within the story and to serve a certain kind of line and a certain structure that we're trying to create with the story. So whatever it is that needs to happen in order to complicate things and situations and reveal things about human beings and behavior, we just construct the character according to that. So we never start by saying, okay, let's create, what about this character, someone who's like this and like that. I mean, we don't, and actually I don't know much more about the characters than what's in the script, which is something I always tell the actors beforehand, before we start working together, that, you know, this is what it is. I can't have any conversation about, you know, your character's childhood, because I have no idea. So it's, yeah, so I guess it's us creating the character that we need to create in order to tell this story, and not starting from characters.
Okay, it's interesting. Your characters aren't ciphers. They're not like, say for instance, the way J.G. Ballard uses them in a novel is representative of something else. They're deeper than that. And it comes back to this idea of a dialogue, of lines about a watch, or the way someone lies on a bed. Might seem banal, but they tell us an awful lot about these characters.
Yeah, no, it's. I'm not saying that they work like that. I do think they're as deep as starting from creating a character, but it's not the process. It's not the process of starting from a character and then creating a story around that. It's the story you want to tell, and which is the most important, and then you figure out what the character is according to that. So it doesn't change. You know, it can fail either way, wherever you start from, or be successful, you know, wherever you start from. It's just a different process.
I think we've got time for a couple more questions. Someone had their hand up down the front, and is there someone further? Yes, right at the back. Yes.
Hello, I'm here. Wow, what a film. It was really good. I hope I speak for everyone. My question is, it's a very funny film, one of the funniest films I've ever seen, and one of the funniest performed films I've ever seen. What is your favourite line of dialogue in the film? Thank you.
What is your favorite dialogue in the film?
I like the menstruation bit, and also the secret.
That's not a line, that's like a whole monologue.
Thank you again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't know, it's hard to, you know, single out one line.
Yep.
Hi Yorgos. That was a really nice film. It's one of my favorite of your movies, basically, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So my question basically has to do with the societies that your films are based in, because some of your films are based in Greece and they take place in Greece, while some others are placed in other areas of the world. Basically, they went from the very local thing from you, which is your home country, to the international. And when it comes to Dogtooth, for instance, I always see it and interpret it through the lens of being a Greek, and it always speaks to me because of that. So the question is, do you want to convey something specific to the societies you base your films in? So when you did Dogtooth, did you want to say something to Greeks in particular about what it means to being a Greek? Or through your international movies, do you want to convey something specific to people where your movies are based in?
I think that most of the films that I've made so far could take place anywhere. But at the same time, I like setting them somewhere specific, because the place and the people do add more to the story and to the film, and they color it in a certain way. But I think the essence of the film, or the core of it, mostly there are stories that could take place anywhere. and that's why, for instance, there was a discussion of where do we set this film? Should it be in England, in America, or whatever? And obviously, me being Greek, it lends certain things to the film, but at the same time, you know, people knowing that I'm Greek, they might see too much into it. And so I sometimes think that it would be much better if people watched films and they didn't know who made them. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your questions, but I guess it's no. It's like I make the films, and hopefully they resonate much more from the actual story or the place. And it's always great when they are colored by the place and the people, but that's to add the humanity of it and not necessarily saying something about the specific place.
If you actually haven't seen Yorgos' film Dogtooth and also his follow-up Alps, it's available on Curzon Home Cinema to watch, which is a shocking play. But I will also say that you can actually get Alps in FOP just down the road, and it's the one film I don't know why, but I keep coming back to, and I know some people haven't seen it, and it really is worth watching. It's quite a remarkable film. Do tell people to come and see this film. It is now on general release, but it's also should be seen in this screen more than any other. Thank you very much to Curzon and Curzon Artificial Life for organising this event, but most of all, can you please join me in thanking Yorgos Lanthimos.
Thank you.